Okay, so thank you very much. There's two reasons why I'm wearing the alternate strip for the All Blacks. One is I was told not to wear black because if they want to take photos, you see, I'll just disappear. The other reason that I'm wearing the All Blacks jumper is because I have to follow Lou Rosenfeld. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to talk about earthquakes, rugby and Jaffas. Over the years, I've heard a lot of people talk about agile and use rugby metaphors. And given the fact that the All Blacks are in the Rugby World Cup this weekend, if you haven't heard, I thought I'd give it a try. Start out as I mean to go on. Okay, so what I'm actually going to talk about is a case study about an agile approach that we used for the Christchurch City Council website upgrade. It's a business reality talk. It's not about how user experience is going to, the ideal project for user experience. It's about the business reality and the fact that sometimes you can't always do UX that you want to do, but you have to make do with what you've got. I'm going to start off with the earthquakes, move on to rugby, and the Jaffas will pop up later. So for those who don't know, in 2010, there was a massive earthquake in Canterbury. That was followed fairly quickly by a series of aftershocks. The initial quake was 7.1 on the Richter scale, and then the others just kept on coming and kept on coming. The city basically crashed to the ground, and it had to be rebuilt. The vertical and horizontal infrastructure, or architecture of the city, needed to be rebuilt from the ground up. There's work still going on, and just like any good web upgrade project, it doesn't stop. It keeps on going. The other thing that happened with the earthquakes is that the processes changed really quickly. There was a very quick shift in focus from business as usual to making sure that the immediate needs of people were actually met. What that meant for the Christchurch City Council website was that it had been redesigned in 2010 before the quakes. What it meant to the website was that there was a huge and immediate need to get a lot of information up and available to the general public. It meant that the website actually became a little bit disjointed and started to crumble as well. The other thing that was a little bit wrong and a little bit broken about the Christchurch City Council website was that back in 2010, people hadn't really got a hold of this user focus. So it was very organisationally focused. All of the content had an organisational focus. They used language like curbside recycling when what they meant was rubbish. There was a whole lot of that, and I know that sort of is quite common with government websites, but Christchurch City Council had a lot of work to do. So in rugby, you will get that this is all about rugby. It will be until Sunday morning at about 8 o'clock when everybody will either be cheering or otherwise. So the quakes changed the rules for everyone in Christchurch. Life will never be the same there. More than 180 people died, and as I mentioned, the whole infrastructure just basically fell to pieces. But rules in life, in rugby, and in web and technology changes all of the time. If we think back to 2010, when they did the previous upgrade, there wasn't a real demand for a responsive website. When they created the website back in 2010, the platform that they were using was under license, it was useful, it was usable. The content management system was never useful or usable, but they could actually get the job done. It was a nasty old system. What we had to do was to understand what the scale of the problem was before we even could commit budget to the upgrade. Now, when we're talking about a website that hasn't really been looked at for 5 years, and we've got major issues like an outdated platform, an outdated content management system, and content that's pretty horrible, we really needed to understand the scope of it. So the first thing that was done was a major content audit of every page that was on that site. 2,500 pages not counting the likes of meetings and minutes and agendas and press releases, what we found was that a lot of that was out of date and really badly written, again with that organisational focus. There was a directive within the Christchurch City Council to make our products and our services more user-focused. So we had to identify which of that content needed to be rewritten, which of it could stay as it was, which of it could be dumped, and which of it needed to be restructured. Because just like the city of Christchurch, there are changes that need to happen following the earthquakes. Now, strong leadership in any project is important. The Canterbury and Christchurch didn't fare so well in the leadership stakes following the earthquakes, but we are very lucky, the All Blacks are very lucky to have such an awesome coach. The Christchurch City Council website upgrade project, we had a fantastic leader. Our product owner is an amazing woman. She's driven, she's approachable, she's somebody that can basically pour oil over troubled waters quite quickly. But she's a very, very busy lady. She's hardly ever available for sort of daily stand-ups and sort of the processes that are involved. Now, in any team, you normally have more than one coach. All Blacks, as an example, they have a forwards coach and they have a backs coach. What we did in our team was that we needed to get a proxy product owner to come in and stand in for our very busy lady, and that was me. So I came in and basically started to take sort of more of the hands-on stuff. She was the boss. The buck stopped with her. But I was there to assist her and make sure that when there were difficult calls to make and she wasn't available, that there was at least somebody to make an interim decision. She and I were working quite closely together, so I sort of had a fair idea of where her opinions would go. So it did work reasonably well. It also helped that as a UX person, I could be the voice of the customer. It's one thing that in the City Council and quite often in a lot of government organisations, that voice of the customer can often get lost, and I think it's really important for us to remember that. Okay. Does anybody know what the guy on the far side's name is? Because I don't even know. We do know Steve Hansen, we do know Grant Fox. Those selectors and making sure that you've got the team right for a project of this scale is really important. The benefits for us was that we had the basis of a really good team, in-house skills. One of the really, really big bonuses of having that in-house team was that these guys knew the organisation inside and out. Now I know Amy's going to talk later on about the dinosaurs of working in government departments. Yep, it really does. It is true. I will certainly attest to that, and she can go into more detail. But the organisational processes, the organisational sticking points, everything was just so antiquated. The technology requirements that we had to deal with was actually really quite difficult. But by having that in-house team, we were lucky to be able to have people to help us get through and navigate those waters. But on the flip side of that, the team had limited UX experience. Most of them had never had much to do with UX at all. Some of them had not had anything to do with web upgrades before, and none of them had any experience with the new platform that we were going to, which was a Silver Stripe product, the CWP, which is the Common Web Platform. Now, I've already spoken to a few people from government departments here who use CWP, but we didn't have anybody who knew anything about it. So it was really important that we got additional staff on board. Now, our UX designer was a technical specialist, a product manager, project manager, never done UX design in his life. He was, however, somebody who has architecture in his background, so he brought those skills to the table. I will say, he is there in the audience, stick your hand up. Okay, our graphic designer, or our visual designer, she was basically a very awesome graphic designer, but again, never done anything in UX. She had done a course in UX run by UB, by the way, not that I'm trying to promote them in any way. She's sitting down here. Can you stick your hand up? No, she doesn't want to. Okay. So we also had a need for specialist content writers, which we had to bring in, one of whom is also sitting down there. So if you've got any questions about this stuff, ask them. So what we did decide is that we had to use an agile method. We decided, the council doesn't typically do their projects in an agile way, but it was decided that this was a really important thing for us to do. We had a really short timeline to actually achieve the go live. So I was brought on board in January. We were supposed to go live on the 1st of July, and we didn't actually get the funding go ahead until March? Yeah, March. So we actually had like 3 or 4 months to basically get a fully fledged website up and going. Designed, developed, tested, and away we go. So we decided that an agile method would probably help. But again, to that limited experience, very few of the team had had anything to do with agile in the past. And now I've lost my place to move. Oh, we go. Specialists brought in. Okay, so we knew we had a big problem. So what does any good team do? They analyse the competition. I'm pretty sure that the All Blacks have looked very closely at each one of these teams that they could possibly ever sort of face. So what we did is that we identified that the biggest challenges for us was the organisational constraints that I've already mentioned. Limited budget, limited time, the technology requirements, trying to integrate with systems that were pretty horrible, pretty old, pretty outdated. Oh, there we go. So we also had a major problem because of the time. Now I know this is a room of UX practitioners. We've already been told by Lou how important UX research is, but we were told categorically, I'm sorry, you do not have the time to talk to users before you do your design. No gasps? I'm surprised. Anybody who knows me, I'm a user researcher. It was like a kick. But that was what we were told we had to do. And we did it. What we did is that we used a lot of alternate data that was available. Now, don't get me wrong, best practice, do the user research. We had stakeholders telling us that we should do the user research, but they weren't prepared to sign off on the budget and they weren't prepared to push that date out. So this is what we had to do. We did do our competitor analysis. I think we started with like 20 other local government organisations and looked at what they were doing with their web design. We narrowed that down to 6. So we narrowed that down to 6 that we used as, ideal. The sorts of things that we wanted to do with the website. After we did that competitor analysis, actually there was a whole lot of stuff going on at the same time. We had one part of the website that was being redesigned prior to the, sort of the major upgrade. It was the rubbish and recycling team. It was actually a mind shift for them to go from curbside recycling to rubbish. So they were doing some work on the information architecture just for that little section, a tiny little section of the site. And they had some tree jack data. Yes, of course, there are plugs here for all sorts of products. So we had a little bit of data from that about how that structure would work. So the information architecture had kind of evolved kind of organically. So when I came in, I basically said, right, let's take a step back and actually stop just trying to evolve it. Let's actually completely start again, wipe the slate and do it again. We were allowed to do a second run of that tree jack research with the adjusted IA. And we did show that the adjusted IA, working on more of a user focus, worked better. We had some Qualaroo surveys. We had Crazy Egg. Anybody use Crazy Egg? Yep. So it's a heat map kind of thing that shows you where people are actually clicking through. It was useful to show us what wasn't actually being used, what wasn't being clicked through on from the homepage. Two of the biggest things that we had was Google Analytics, and we had a lot of data there that was really useful to help us identify what parts of the site were being looked at the most, and what of those journeys were actually broken. Where were people dropping out? Where were they coming in from? So just what you're supposed to do with Google Analytics. The other useful source of data that we had was the customer services data. Now, the Christchurch City Council has a customer services team that takes all of those phone calls from irate residents who can't find the information on the website. They, excuse me, they have a lot of data, but it wasn't particularly well organised. So what we had to do was sift through that data and try and extrapolate what that actually meant, marry it up with the Google Analytics, the Qualaroo, the TreeJack and everything else to try and come up with a better idea of what was actually going on. But that customer services data was vital. If we hadn't have had that customer services data, then I think I would have been stamping my foot a little bit harder to get some quality user research done. We did our pre-match analysis and we realised, okay, we've got the stuff, we kind of understand what's going on. Now, I'm not suggesting that we had a complete and thorough understanding of what the users needed, but we had a fairly good understanding of it. Ideally, we would have done some more user research, some more of that formative research, but we didn't have the luxury of that. Okay. I heard a little giggle, only a little one. When I was living in the UK, this is what everybody used to say, don't choke. So for those who don't know anything about rugby, I apologise, this is all about rugby. Is that for any situation, there are those other people who are involved, who have an influence over what it is that you want to do. Now, a design team, if they were in isolation and they could do exactly what they wanted, that's fine, away you go. But you actually need to think about what the fans are thinking, what the naysayers are thinking, what the press is thinking in rugby. For a website upgrade, we needed to really be aware of what the stakeholders were thinking and how they were reacting to this and keeping them involved and keeping them informed about what we were doing. I don't know about you, but if you've ever worked in a large organisation where you're suggesting quite a radical change, there can be quite a lot of pushback. Now, we were only changing the website. We weren't changing, we weren't making people disestablished or anything. We were only changing the website. So what we did was that we created a few mechanisms to help us get that buy-in and to help us maintain that conversation and to change the attitude to a more positive attitude. We did have one bonus. People were ready for that change within the organisation. They were aware of how bad the website was. So we did have one bonus. We created a working group. Now, the working group consisted of people from the design team, from the marketing team, from communications, from customer services, and from our team. Now, it worked really well. Each week we got together, or each week or every 2 weeks, we got together and we discussed the problem at hand. We did a lot of co-creation workshops with them, so they were involved the whole way through the process. Now, they then went back and kind of disseminated that information through their teams. We also had senior stakeholder management meetings on a regular basis to keep them informed of where we were at as well. So when we made any of those big design decisions, we would just take it back and get sense checked with them. The product owner and myself also attended a lot of the business unit meetings. Now, this is their regular weekly meetings, but we would go along and sort of say for half an hour and basically tell them what we were doing and why we were doing it to try and get that buy-in. One of the biggest things with an organisational change like that is that if people don't agree with what we're doing, if they're not bought on that journey, and if they don't understand and feel involved, then there can be that pushback. So we really tried to come in from the top and from the side. Now, the team also went and talked to individual content owners around the business to help make sure that everybody knew what was going on and that everybody was involved. One of our directives was to try and get people to own the content and do their own writing. Game plan. So, in order to win a game, or get a website upgrade across the post, a game plan is needed. But it needs to be flexible. In a truly agile way, we need to respond to changes and we need to be aware that it's not just best practice that we can put in place. There's obviously other requirements, business requirements, technology requirements, and we were sideswiped quite often by the politics of the organisation. So we had to adjust the requirements quite a lot along the way, and quite a lot we had to compromise on the functionality that we wanted, the design ideas that we wanted, and the content. We had to compromise quite a lot, but never to detriment, we hope. The information architecture was something that, typically we would talk to user groups about this. Again, as I said, didn't have the luxury. What we did was that some of us on the team, we basically came up with a draft information architecture, looking at things from the user's point of view. And then we took it to that working group, and we got them to test it. First, we did an open card sort where I gave them, we gave them everything that they could put there. They put them into groups. Great, they match ours. Then put the labels on. Fantastic, they're not too far off. And then we got them to check what we had said, and actually there were a few minor adjustments. Then we did optimal sort. We did an optimal sort, put it out to the public, and we got quite a good response rate for that. And what we realised was that even though we had a reasonable information architecture, there were still adjustments that we had to make, much to the disgust of the content managers who were already trying to get on with what they were getting on with. We did create personas. Does anybody say, how did you do that without talking to users? We made it up. I've been doing this for nearly 15 years. The team knew these people, and we did the best that we could with the resources that we were given. Now, those personas were socialised around the organisation. They were introduced, and I think they really worked and helped people identify with what we were trying to achieve. We also created guidelines around what the website was there for, how it was structured, but also the content guidelines as well. Nothing? Nothing? Come on! Now, I understand that the international speakers were warned that New Zealand audiences can be pretty hard and don't give you much back. I didn't think that was going to be the case, but hey. All right, so never underestimate your opponents, okay? Now, our opponents, as I think I've mentioned, were time, budget, and skill. We had no chance to talk to users, and counter to the agile sort of world, there was heavy documentation required. It's a council, government organisation, and they needed us to document everything. Now, in a real agile way, we should have, sort of found alternatives. But in the reality, the business world, you can't always do that, and you do have to adjust. Now, it was a bit of a shift for them, so the stakeholder meetings should have been minuted, and, who was in attendance, and ticks and crosses and everything. So I sort of said, hey, look, here's the PowerPoint presentation, let's just annotate that. No, sorry. You have to still do that minuted document. Not so great, but anyway, we got there. The other thing was our rookie team. Now, one of the things with the rookie team was that these were all really amazing people, and they really did pick up the ball and run with it. Come on. Okay, we also had those technology limitations, as I mentioned. Okay, I was thrilled to see that Adam Polanski yesterday in his workshop had a slide with the haka on it from 1926. There we go. Teamwork. To win anything, teamwork is vital. Now, we had one big problem at the beginning of our project, which is that we were all spread all over the fifth floor. We had one on the sixth floor, and she used to just have to come down. Now, it was a real problem because in any project, it's really important that you are actually sitting together so you can have those quick conversations. Because our product owner was so busy, being able to catch her when she was sitting miles away and you couldn't see when she was at her desk was a real problem. So the first thing we had to overcome was our location. So we actually did all get put together. We were probably the noisiest group on the floor after that, thanks muchly to Peter and his singing at every point, but there we go. The knowledge of the organisation was amazing. The operating procedures, we created operating procedures for each of the different roles to try and help everybody know what they were supposed to do because they were so novice. And we had regular social lunches and dinners, as you're supposed to. Now, we were talking about this yesterday with the team and sort of said that our team was kind of like a dysfunctional but very loving family. Now, we all worked really well, and I don't think that there's another team that I've ever worked with that I was sad to leave. But anyway, there we go. All right. He is my God. He is also my son's God, which is a bonus. All right, so kick off. We had to stand up CWP. Now, this was a bit of a mission in itself because obviously with a government organisation, we had to wait for the funding to come through. If there was anything we could, one of the lessons that we learned was to make sure that we actually had the technology to do the development early, and we didn't have that. So that put us on a little bit on the back. We had some agile training. We got Silver Stripe down to do some agile training for the team so that we could actually understand what we were supposed to be doing. And we started just working on getting the basics right, just working through the process. Once all the players were in place, we had a team of about 18 people. Not ideal for agile, but it did work. We had our draft IA and we had our guidelines. We were ready for anything. Right, agile, Scrum. I told you the metaphor was going to be there. Okay, so a Scrum is, as for those who don't know, 16 players pushing like crazy in opposite directions, right? And this is what it felt like. We were still pushing against the organisation at quite a lot of places. But eventually one team wins. I'm glad to say that it was our development team, our team that did. Now, as I said, there was about 18 of us in the team, so the agile sort of process became quite difficult, and we had to kind of adjust our stand-ups. Having all of the content development design team all together just didn't work, so we kind of split it so that the content guys kind of went their way and the dev and the design guys went their way. We didn't have a dedicated Scrum Master, so we were actually Skyping with Tony from Silver Stripe, and he was just helping keep us on track with the agile process. And then we have to think that we started off. Now, New Zealanders play this running game, and we had to respond to the changes that occur on the field as we went. We had those daily stand-ups to kind of see what the problems were. Most of the problems were actually around content owners not getting back, not getting involved, not helping the content team to actually get things done. We had technology issues along the way. We had, people get sick, those sorts of things. But the major problem that we had was those blockers that would stop us, those tackles. It was hard work. And we worked in 2-week sprints. And those 2-week sprints worked right up until the last couple of sprints before we went live, and then we went to 1-week sprints to try and get us across that line. Now, I would say that it was not a good model of UX Agile or Agile UX. We didn't have the luxury of being able to do UX design a sprint before we did the development, a sprint before we did the testing. It actually became quite mishmashed and a little bit difficult at times to try and get everybody doing what needed to be done on time. So, we did, however, celebrate early and often. This is what we're hoping to do. Celebrating early and often on Sunday morning. Is there anybody who's not getting up on Sunday morning? Shame. Shame. Go to a pub. Wear a rugby t-shirt, gold if you have to, but go to a pub and support them. That's me. Okay, and this is where the Jaffers come in. So the Jaffers, not a giggle. Oh, I'll have to explain to you another time why this Jaffers is a funny. But anyway, Jaffers. Content was kind of the focus for us. We needed to get that content across the line. So what we did was is that for every page that we wrote, we received a Jaffa. Emma down here was our Jaffa hand-router. So she kept an eye on how many pages that were actually being pushed up. And so at each of our daily stand-ups, we got a Jaffa per page. That meant that if the content team was working incredibly hard, everybody got a sugar rush at 9 o'clock in the morning. And if they weren't, well, we just had to muddle on through anyway. All of our teams had their own stories to get across the line, but that content focus and that Jaffa ritual, which is basically what it became, and has continued right the way through, and is now kind of a standing joke with us, because 2,500 Jaffas amongst a team of 20. Can you not tell? I think I ate more than my fair share. Okay. So, rugby, like a web upgrade, is a game of two halves. Oh, I did get one for that. Thank you. Okay, so first one is coming up with the structure, which we did. The next one is getting it across the line. So we did have our regular check-ins with our stakeholders, and I think that really helped because it kept us on track. There was hopefully no major surprises that they were going to get, and we were not going to be faced with major surprises. We did a round of guerrilla research. We took somebody who really didn't want to go out and talk to the public about her design to Westfield Shopping Mall, and I think she enjoyed it, yes? No, she did. We did also do a benchmarking study before we went live to assess the actual usability of the site. Now, I was surprised to find out that there were no user researchers or specialist user researchers in the South Island. I'm a user researcher. Anybody need one in the South Island? I'm available. We actually had to call in a favour from a friend of mine because it's no good marking your own homework. There was no beta site per se, but what we did do is that we did an early release to the staff so that they could give us feedback. So those Jaffas again. Okay, so just like Canterbury winning the ITM Cup from the Aucklanders, we did get off over the line at the full-time whistle. Now, with everything that was going against us, I'm pretty proud of the team that actually made sure that we got that website stood up and working exactly on time. 10 p.m. on the 30th of June, we stood that website up and it was going. No extra time required. The go live was actually a minimum of fuss, which was a major bonus because I've been involved with other projects where you've got technology that breaks, you've got to roll back, you've got major problems. Our project manager was quite concerned that we might end up going back. The website was much improved. Now, that's not just me saying that. We got quite a lot of good comments back. Now, the majority of the content was already on the site, but there were still some major rewrites to be done. There were some penalties along the way. We did have a really steep learning curve that did slow us down. Didn't stop us from getting there, but it did slow us down. We did have those compromises that we had to make. We had to, at one point, we had the the information architecture mapped out for one particular part of the organisation. We took it to them and they said no. So it's following all of our guidelines. This is what we really suggest will work for you, and they said no. Now, we could have taken that fight further, or in this situation, because it was a political situation, we had to back down and actually make some compromises. Now, we also, once we actually launched the website, we had some negative media attention with regards how much the website cost. I don't know if anybody saw this, but it cost a certain amount of money. But it was all in-house costs, except for, of course, the contractors. But we had an agency who sort of said, we could have done it for less. Now, we're talking about 2,500 pages of content to be rewritten, a website completely redesigned, and the technology to be stood up. And I don't think that anybody could have done it for less than what we did it. We did debrief the stakeholders, and they were thrilled to bits. We had quite a lot of positive feedback. We also did our repeat benchmarking study, so exactly the same script 1 month after go live, using our newly trained UX designer who did awesome. First ever UX test, and he did awesome. What we found is that we reduced the time to complete the tasks. When we did it originally on the old site, 3 minutes to complete a basic task like finding out where your rubbish bin is being collected. We reduced that from 3 minutes to just under 1 minute. We also improved all of the satisfaction scores for the actual tasks, for the visual design, for the content type. Is anybody familiar with NPS, the Net Promoter Score? A few of you? Okay, cool. So for those of you who are not, ask me later and I'll explain it. But we went from a Net Promoter Score of -24 to a really respectable 33, just through the team's hard work. Okay, so it's not quite the end of the story. Work continues after that final whistle. Training, the organisation in web and content design is really important, and the team is still fighting that good fight. They've adjusted the design a little bit. They're still working on the content. Those new skills, though, are being used, and it's amazing to see a team sort of adopt UX in such a wholehearted way. There is an ongoing evaluation of the website. And just like the retirements that there will be after the Rugby World Cup, there were a lot of the team who have had to step back, myself included. But they're doing pretty well. So, the take-home messages. User research is really important. But if you have to, you can make do. You do need to consider that those business requirements will not always allow you to do things exactly the way that you would like to do them. But there's always a way around that. Any research that you can do, any data that you can get hold of will help. UX is about, just like rugby, a UX is about making sure that all of the stakeholders are happy. I am pretty sure that on Sunday morning, there will either be some very elated New Zealand supporters or some very sad New Zealand supporters. So, just like in the earthquakes, everything came crashing down on the website. It had to be rebuilt. Oh, and there was a lot of Jaffas as well.